So I'm Erica Burman, and I'm an unusual, I guess I'm an unusual participant in the arena of childhood studies, in the sense that I have a psychology background. And in the days when the first sort of discussions about childhood studies or the new sociology of childhood were arising in the 1990s in this country, I felt like I was a bit of a kind of someone that they'd want to, psychology was the evil discipline to be warded off as allied to a deficit model of the child, etc., etc. So for me, it was the opening up of, the finding of a space of critical engagement and thinking that was sadly missing where I was. I have a background in developmental psychology. And for 26 years I was based in a psychology department. I'm now in an Institute of Education and at Manchester University. And I've been centrally engaged in my own work. I taught on a women's studies program for 10 years, a master's in women's studies program that I helped to set up. So the questions about women and children, or feminism and childhood, have been very much in my mind for a long time, particularly as in the kinds of critiques of developmental psychology that I've tried to formulate have always been about how you can, every time we invoke the child, we're always invoking the others around the child, and the children are complex and multiple and occupy multiple positions, so that those relationally complicated positions around them, and that as soon as we start to do that, then all the other positions around the child that are usually occluded or rendered invisible, like the state and socio-political structuring of adult-child relationships, then are enabled to come to the fore. So I was delighted when when I was invited to contribute and participate in this seminar, because it names some really central concerns of my own work, and the guiding questions are really thought-provoking. But it's a very, very challenging and ambitious project to put feminism and the politics of childhood together.
Coming back to what you said about your background in psychology, do you think that there is space to incorporate psychology in childhood studies, or in that debate? Because, as you said, it's usually the enemy, especially developmental psychology. Yeah.
Well, I think there has to be space, even though I would see myself sometimes as an anti-psychologist. I think that we still don't know what the space of the genuine space of the psychological is, and that in a way my observations of the forms and preoccupations of childhood studies, certainly in this country over the years, are that there has been a continuous searching for, and in some sense reinvention of, the space that psychology has occupied in it, that is continuously attempted to be evacuated or put under erasure or something. So it's there all the time in social policy and practice, for better or worse, and I think it's better to engage critically with it rather than pretend it's not exercising an influence. Yeah.
So you gave a paper today. Can you tell us a bit about this paper?
Okay, well, thank you. This paper arises from a project that I've conducted with colleagues in the University of Manchester around the bedroom tax, which is, as hopefully people listening to this will know, it's a particular cut in services or in welfare support for families who are eligible to receive help with their rent. So it's a welfare cut related to housing, and we were interested in exploring some of the educational impacts of the bedroom tax, and so we interviewed, as well as teachers and school staff and community organisations, we interviewed families. And so in this paper I took a statement made by one of the participants, a mother, a parent in this project, and who said, "Tell your professor we are good mothers." And I explored it in relation to 3 different frameworks that are currently have some traction in critical debates in feminist theory and in childhood studies, although not quite equivalently. So the first one was intersectionality theory, the second psychosocial studies, and the third critical disability studies. And each of those have engaged with both feminisms, the politics of feminisms in the plural, and the politics of childhood, but not in the same ways. So what I was trying to do was to situate this particular account. And importantly, I had to say that that's why I explained the bedroom tax isn't about mothering explicitly, but clearly this woman was really highlighting the subtext of these kind of welfare cuts that specifically target the poor in terms of surveillance and regulation of poor communities and family life, in particular in relation to the bedroom tax, the actual space that families occupy, in ways that really do feel like putting mothering capacities and status into question, as well as what a child is, very much.
You also spoke about psychological homelessness.
Yes.
With that regard.
Yes. So I think one of the things that's coming out very much from this work is the connections, the very intimate, deep connections between say something measurable educational outcomes and or how children do at school and what's going on in their families. And it's not surprising to anyone with a social analysis whether children have had enough to eat and whether they feel comfortable or whether they're troubled by the financial and other kinds of pressures that their families are under, their parents, their siblings, whether they've had enough sleep by sharing a bedroom with a sibling who's maybe 10 years older than them. Those things are going to affect how they are how they do at school, how they behave at school, as well as their attainment. So questions of well-being or mental health for children, for school staff, for community organisations who are, if they still exist, are under tremendous pressure and very distressed by the distress they encounter from people around them and of parents. So in a way we've tried to bring those ideas around psychological homelessness into the idea of because the bedroom tax is a form of pressure towards forced migration. You could put it in a much broader international context, and also in terms of a gendered analysis, look at this in terms of the sort of the feminization of poverty, or the feminization through poverty, in the financialization of the poor that is going on internationally. And overall, these ideas about psychological homelessness, and I'm also a group analyst. I'm engaged in sort of thinking about and training mental health practitioners. So the link between the material and the psychological is very important to me, not in a reductionistic way as so much use of psychological theory it's used to do, but that clearly there are connections. And I think that some of what is going on or what's emerging from our material is a real sense of undermining of a sense of entitlement to security. And so it's part of the kind of increasing insecurity that's permeating our everyday lives, that people who have been offered council housing, supported social housing, who are offered it on the understanding that it would be theirs for the conceivable future, are now having it taken away, told that they have to move, or they should move, or they should take in some random person as a lodger, that they're horrified that they're, child protection issues, questions. And it's stripping away the social supports of community belonging that are very important to people, that connect the home to neighbourhood, and are part of what sustain a broader collective kind of sense of place. So for us, in what's emerged very powerfully from this work, and what I think actually exemplifies the three frames that I was talking about in this paper, the intersectionality, psychosocial studies, and disability studies, are those the connection between material conditions and the psychological.
And you end on a sort of positive note, I think, because you actually take the statement as maybe sort of a not revolution in the coming, but change. Change is coming because poverty is not seen in terms of individual shame, but actually, she's engaging with the debate and saying no. So there's no. It's more collective.
Well, yes. I mean, I think I wanted to bring this fragment from a transcript to this discussion, partly because she's posing a big question to us as academics, to us as to researchers about what we're doing with our work and why we're doing it, and we weren't assessing whether she was a good mother or not, but we're clearly part of an apparatus that does. Certainly psychology does, and this mother, this woman, was making very clear statement about refusing to be interpolated or hailed into a place of scrutiny and evaluation that could only be felt within dominant discourses as negative, and instead asserting a collective community response and a clear message saying we refuse those dominant evaluations that are being put upon us. We claim a more general identification, and I think her statement is unusual because there's a lot of social research around that suggests that that the policies around austerity and welfare cuts and the fear of being a scrounger and all of that are actually making people more individualized, less able to identify with each other, wanting to say, well, I'm not really poor, those people are poor over there, they're the ones who can't feed their children. Well, actually, some of our participants can't feed their children. They're sort of telling us directly and or indirectly that they can't very well. They need help and support. And this woman is saying, well, it's not our fault. And she's right. So partly I bring this example as a more hopeful example that shows that people are aware of and have a political analysis, an explicit political analysis of why they're in the situation they're in that isn't psychologized. And in that sense, the anti-psychologist in me is very happy to hear that, but also wanting to deliver on the responsibility that she's making explicit on what we do with this work.
And so, just to finish, what are some of the key themes that are emerging for you from this seminar?
Well, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, this seminar. So many papers to digest, to engage with, so many interesting discussions, people from different countries. I think I was surprised by the return to sort of Marxist theory of social reproduction. I think it's welcome in some ways. We need to be reminded of those structuralist accounts alongside the sort of, because my worry about some of the post-human, Deleuzian and some of the other kinds of currents that are occupying feminist studies and childhood studies are that they distribute and disperse power so much that you really lose sight of those kinds of structural analyses. So I think they're a useful counter to each other. I think what else to say? I think insofar as there were reports, if you like, from different national contexts, I think that's really helpful, because the histories of feminist institutionalization, whether at the level of the state or the academy, are different in different countries, as also the relationship between child rights advocacy and childhood studies. So that's given me a lot to think about. And I think taking some really sharp examples, like the other Erica Meintz's, that talk about the prison state and how the contemporary situation in the US is creating certain kinds of environments for particular mobilizations on the right, or even the left-right continuum kind of not necessarily being the right way to think about the politics of the recruitment of both feminist analysis and child saving, which is always problematic, within a broader issue through attention to the site of incarceration. So I think that methodologically, for the purposes of conceptual and political analysis, it's very helpful to take a particular arena, a particular problem like that. So I think what I'm going to take away is some of these sort of if you like, small spheres of concern, and how these debates that in the abstract are very hard to get hold of, but come to be so meaningful in specific contexts and situations, equally around child domestic labour in Nigeria, etc. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.